Yeah. So straight away there is your issue. 13, 14, fucking what's going on here? Go for the wow. Just no, most of spines collapse before they even get there.
Fair enough. I'm not going to bother wasting, my breath.
More because, let's face it, it's a fucking massive part of that purchase. Looked absolutely bonkers. Sometimes it's actually not the dealer's fault. I looked it up on bullshit. I know this farm's guilty of it all the time. Complete full-time fucker for it. I think that's pretty much podcast over there, isn't it? I've not shared this fish with anybody yet.
Welcome to the Koi Talk podcast with myself, Chris Wall, and Ricky Stoddart.
Hello, folks.
Feeling good? Feeling bright? Spring's coming?
Amazing, mate.
Yeah, you look it.
Cheers, pal. No sleep last night.
Is that kids or is that stressing about this shipment coming in?
No, it was the fucking alarm the electric alarm that goes off if something trips on
the farm.
board. So nice phone call at 2:00.
It's probably something that a lot of people don't appreciate. They sort of think like running a koi farm is, you get to deal with fish all day, but it's 24/7 operation, isn't it? Like,
yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still, my dad lives on site, so he does deal with that when it happens, but I still won't rest until
the stress of it.
He's messaged me to say it's back on.
Yeah.
And then at 2:00 it happened, and I've got a pretty active mind, so I do sleep very, very well. But if I get disturbed, I'm fucked.
Yeah.
Generally. So 2:00 come. I think I just actually started drifting, and then it went off again at 2:30. That was game over.
Well, I had a different kind of alarm. Has no clock to it. It's like a biological clock, and it just screams, "Daddy, I want ice cream." Sort of intermittently, sort of 1, 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And then my little boy woke me up by jumping on my nadgers this morning at 5:00. So
I don't mind at 5. This time of morning, this time of year, 5:00's you've got to make most of the day, haven't you?
Innit? Yeah. Not when you're going to bed at midnight, though.
I like getting up, buying a few fish. see
prime time in Japan,
and then, on with my day. Awesome.
So we're going to chat about a subject today, which I think there's a lot of misinformation out there about.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that
could be anything.
Something that we've been quite au fait and familiar for years, and you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. But it surprised me last year when we were chatting with Alan, I think it was, Alan Tate, and he said, I've never heard that term, or something along those lines. I don't hear that term very often.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you guys say a lot, sort of thing. And that term is chibi nissai.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, the discussion today is going to be about what are the advantages, disadvantages? Are they something that should be taken seriously? To those that are unaware, the term essentially small nissai.
Yeah, so many different names for it. I've not even translated all of them.
Yeah.
Chibi, chisai, shimmy. It's just let's go on. Seem to make a load, but ultimately all comes back to small nissai.
Yeah,
right there is the problem. Nobody in a business/marketing background would ever use the word small in front of a product.
Yeah. Psychology of it, isn't it?
Even so, this is where it goes wrong. Apple were fucking brilliant at this when they started with their MacBooks and laptops getting thinner and thinner.
I know what you're going to say.
They stopped using, because typically you would say, I don't know, 3cm thick. Just straight away there, all people generally cling on to there is thick. So they change the language and sort of go 3cm thin. First company I'd seen do it, but just fucking genius. But that is ultimately
more positive connotation, isn't it?
Yeah. So straight away there is your issue. These things marketed as small nissai rather than just nissai that they are. Fucks things up because it just completely changes the sort of perception of what they are.
So they kind of
negative connotation towards
it proceeds straight away. What people, it's like loaded questions, isn't it? Like when you've got
I love
that perception and answer before you've even analysed anything, it makes things pretty difficult. We've had it 1,000 times over where someone's got a budget in their mind and they go, right, I've got 500 quid, and you put £1,000 fish in front of them. Oh, that's expensive. No, that's reality. That is because it costs £1,000 and you have a budget of 500. Let's put a 500-pound fish in front of you. No, that one's better. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So the disclaimer straight out there: just because it's small nissai, it does not mean it cannot grow. I think that's pretty much podcast over there, isn't it? Because that's the wrong that really, hopefully, we're going to right in all this. It does not mean it cannot grow. It doesn't even mean it cannot grow to a big size. The circumstances around it are what's important, really. But that is it. They're just nissai. They're a different size.
I think because, like, we've spoken about...
Sorry, Bonsai Koi is another...
Yeah.
Really, that's straight away there starts...
Oh, nice, yeah.
Fucking different.
Have you got
that
any?
Sounds arty. Yeah, amazing.
We've got a shipment.
But that is actually the first term I heard for it way back... Oh, I can't even remember now. It was at Sakazumi. So even still to this day, he has what I call a market stall set up outside his farm in Autumn, which is all fish from anything from 15 cm up to probably 25 tops that are 2 years old, been raised in a different way. And this is a mega hot spot for Japanese hobbyists who go and buy these fish, raise them small, even still, or want to compete at koi shows. And it opened my eyes because it's the first time you got kind of vats set up with them. Then all of a sudden there's 3 bowls, I still remember them well, with little carbon air filters in. And no bigger than 20 cm, this Goromo. And it was like 800 quid, I think. And that, to me, back then, I was 13, 14. Fucking, what's going on here? But that was that first insight into that sort of domestic market there of how valuable these things can be for that purpose, especially.
You have that psychological aspect, but when people look at Chibi Nissai with the mindset of going, these are Tosai, wow. The impression of them is superb. So
there we go.
The way the fish are raised, certainly for show side of things, but Chibi Nissai in general, they tend to have a much better skin condition and pigment. Maybe not condition, but pigment is more intense. Those pigment receptors in the skin haven't been stretched, so they're much closer together. So the vibrancy of the pigment is pretty nuts, to be honest with you. But that connection of going, but it's only 2 years old and it's 25 cm.
See, I'm sat here right now, and that Bonsai Koi thing, I've said it and it's come back to me, is just burning an hole in my head, because that, to me, bonsai is an art form.
Yeah.
And when we get to the real business of small nissai, as they're called, but Bonsai Koi, raising them is actually an art form.
Yeah,
it's a serious skill.
Yeah.
One of the best in the world at it, Narita Koi farm.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. You need specific setups, size control, keeping these things at a certain size in order to compete at the top end of a size class in a show, while still developing them at the same time. This is not easy to do. Certain fish are built for it, others aren't, just like we're raising jumbo. When you're working through a batch of fish, if you can refine your eye enough, you will see fish that you can look at and go, that's perfect for raising in the bonsai style, whereas that's perfect for raising in a jumbo
needs
style,
a bigger
or
frame,
wherever it is. There are ones that will sit in between that you can probably do a bit of both with. But yeah, ultimately, I mean, you want to compete at small size classes, you want to get that fish finished, looking its absolute best. And if you've got, one that's Tosai at 20 cm, but because it's not got the maturity to the pigment, this is not something you can force. There might be a Tosai that naturally develops a stronger pigment younger, maybe because it's male or it just naturally does. That's great, but generally they don't. The stuff that's going to be quality later in life needs time. That Benny needs time to layer up and thicken up and colour up. So it's one of the best ways of doing that is to keep it small, so you don't stretch the colour out, but you raise it in a way that really pushes that pigment and spreads it out and thickens it up, finishes it up.
You got a lot of breeders now pushing boundaries with sizes, and that is the focus for a lot of hobbyists. Size. Do you think like maybe the actual quality, the other qualities outstanding of size, are sort of put to the side a lot of the time?
For a lot of hobbyists, I think when that jumbo becomes an obsession, yes, it does, because again, doing that is so difficult and it's very hard to attain all those elements together, because we're talking fish of value at that point as well, crazy values at times.
Them, yeah.
Not saying it can't be done with others, it can, but got to play the numbers game a little bit with all that as well. But yeah, I guarantee you, if I created a pond of Bonsai Koi up to, let's say, 40 cm maximum, you can do it over more varieties as well. So Aoki's a master of this. Nobody goes into Aoki looking for jumbo fish. What they do go in there is, well, regardless of what they go in, they walk out with a mind blown to pieces, because what they've just seen is spectacular. And there's probably a fish no bigger than 65, 70 cm in there. You know, the majority are a lot smaller, because he plays the varieties he's got and producing to its strengths. If he tried to take those varieties and jumbo them, he would lose so much in that quality perspective. But if you let me take a pond, and I don't care what sort of hobbyist this is or what level they're at, and I did a pond of Bonsai Koi to a really high level versus pond of jumbo fish, whatever it is, to whatever level, the impact it would have on you would not compare. It really wouldn't. And that is so much achievable for so many other hobbyists, especially if we look now at the realms of pond heating. So being unheated in a UK climate, right, play things to its strengths. This is what Bonsai Koi is all about, really. It's playing things to its strengths. Well, it's with any koi, to be honest. But what you've got in this scenario is you're not forcing growth, you're focusing on conditioning all the time. Yeah, so you've not got intense feeding. It's much easier to actually look after a pond in this state generally as well, because you've not got that intense feeding going on. And yeah, just really focus on pushing quality. No concerns about size in the slightest, just keeping them well nourished. Obviously, that's important. But focus on developing quality and building that collection in your pond. You'll generally get more fish in your pond as well, because actually stocking levels play a big part in size management at the same time. So I think it's a side of the hobby that's, well, it's never spoken about.
No.
But can be so...
Well, I think it's...
good.
Well, yeah. I think I've got, like, on my notes here, like, not just UK hobbyists, but hobbyists in general missing a trick a little bit. I see a lot of people sort of going, I want to buy a baby champion sort of thing, and they're just looking at Tosai all the time. And not to say that it can't, often it is the case, but in Japan, how many of these smaller size categories are being won by 2-year-old fish that are actually
Loads.
sort of 20, 25 cm?
So many.
And they're purchased specifically and raised specifically with the koi show in mind.
Yep. Yeah, and some of it, don't get me wrong, there are elements where, you'll get that fish finished, so that the growth aspect of it being one. You can still grow. Prime example, this content is on my Koi Wholesale channel to look at the videos. Okawa shear up, sorry, so we want to talk about the growth. Was it last year? I didn't. Or year before, I think. It was the year before. So I had too many fish come in. I had some amazing Tosai shearers from Okawa. There was about, call them 13, 15 cm, I think, on average. And I had to hold them in a 400-gallon one of my quarantine ponds for most of the season. So it got to September, at the point where fish from that same spawning are becoming nissai, basically. And they were still 13 to 15 cm. So what did we do? At that point is when I had a pond free, I started to raise them through winter. And as I said on all the video and showed after, those fish became 40-ish cm nissai by the spring. Still nissai. They did exactly what the other fish had done, just over a different time period. No issues whatsoever with that. They were super small nissai at that point, at that size. Absolutely no issues. I just recovered the lost summer growth through that period. So the other side is, it obviously when it is, still nissai that size, basically the next year does become quite important as they go nissai to sanzai as to what happens, because as you know, they'll lose some of that growth potential that they've got if you're still raising it in that way. But this is where, again, play it to its strengths. There's still some growth capacity in there, but if we're 20 cm at nissai, and you're looking at that next season, you've not really recovered it, you're moving into thing, you probably get to 30, 35, I don't know, whatever it is, the chances of that fish ever becoming monstrous are gone.
Yeah,
that is true, no denying that. But do you want it? Because if you've got that fish raises to 45, 50 in the end and looks absolutely top notch, is there anything wrong with that? No. You know, why not? So, yeah, you can recover some of that growth. Also, the pigment, you know, we're saying, and I mentioned it actually back then, it's that, you know, it's about finishing the colour. It's about bringing it up. But what tends to happen is if you raise a fish in that style and then you start to push the growth from nissai to sansai, you'll tend to find the pigment will actually soften off again as it starts growing and things start stretching out. So you've not lost too much there either. Yeah, is a small nissai going to grow to jumbo? No. Realistically, it's not. But I could take something small nissai that's just not grown over the summer, recover it in winter, then carry on and raise that through to a 75, 80 centimetre fish. No problem whatsoever. This is all the bits people need to understand. It's the circumstances around it. Some lineages, some varieties are far better suited to this style of raising. I mentioned there Aoki, his non-go Sankey, his metallics. A lot of them don't like to be pushed. You know, so if you're having them, play them to their strengths.
Well, sort of like a, don't know, Deutz metallic fish, probably not primed for trying to push on as quick as you can, just for the pigment scenarios, that sharpness, the definition of the pattern. So I think it's understanding the mentality. In Japan, it's more than accepted. Like you said, it's an actual skill, it's an art form to raise fish like this. And it's, you know, as technical as perhaps growing fish, if so, if not in some cases, maybe even more so.
It's harder
to control that discipline.
It's harder.
And keep the fish within the size class as well. That's the other thing. We're talking
temperature management. We talk about heating. You've got to go the other way with heat.
Yeah, but you've got to keep the body up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just stop, you know, keep that growth, because it's very easy. You know, you just get that size, water a bit too warm, that thing's going to stretch out. And if you want to get the body, you've got to feed it more. It just all goes wrong. So yeah, temperature management, there's just so much to do in it. Plus as well, male, female. You know, you have to look at body lines completely differently, because what will tend to happen is, obviously, as you hit nissai-ish, sansai, these nissai that are female can get a bit eggy. So it's often, actually, bonsai raising is often better suited to male fish than female because of that reason, especially if you go in that next year nissai to sansai and doing it. That's the point where it's going to be an issue, because at this point your bone structure's kind of setting a little bit, and when they develop that egg underneath, it just blows that belly line out.
It's got less length for the egg sac to be carried.
Big female fish are no different with that. The belly line's got to be in check. You've just got to look at it slightly differently when it's being raised for that purpose.
Price wise, if people are in the market and don't want to get too carried away, would you say, if you had working within a, you know, relative budget, not sort of crazy budgets, but you know, few hundred quid, 300-400 quid, let's just say that, do you reckon your money would go further show scene? What we're talking about specifically, the objective is to win a prize, for example, go into a category.
I'm going to stop you, mate, to be fair. I don't even want to talk about the show scene with these, to be fair, because if you said that, I'm thinking value for money here and what you can actually build with the money that you've got, and how many problems it eliminates, having this mindset of fuck size, I don't care about size, let's focus on quality. Because by not having, you've got one pond, you want to get the absolute most out of it, you like mixed varieties, you like everything, straight away this methodology of not pushing for size and focusing on quality, which is, let's call that the bonsai, you know, art form really, is far more suited to that, because you're not going to have anything too monstrative in your pond. So then when you keep adding fish to it, there's no issues putting that little tosai in that pond with your other fish that are 40, 50 cent, because you're not worried, you're not trying to push that to its maximum. You're still going to get stuff out of it, but you accept it is what it is. But you're actually changing your eye here as well and focusing on that quality, which will allow you to just look at fish differently. You can focus more on pattern. You can go to different breeders, because let's face it, when you want to do jumbo and big, the pot of breeders shrinks straight away. You've got to go to some heavy hitting bloodlines for a start. So other farms, Showa, Kaze Showa spring to mind, and like the Sekiguchi line, what it used to be, and really Kaze are a descendant, or Kishiji Showa are a descendant of Sekiguchi, really. And that is a lineage there that is all about beauty. And you really need to understand this when you're buying them. But what you get in the kind of ages of koi as it's gone on, you seem to get so much for your money there, because I've spoke before of the three elements, ultimately, and that's where you're going to compromise depending on your budget: skin, body, and pattern. A 3 out of 3 is an expensive fish. So in the case of lineages like this with Kashiji Showa, they don't suit being tried to be pushed. They really don't. But as you know, they look fucking spectacular, really. Even from a young age, they look great.
Stunning fish.
And then it's nurture that. But what you can get there, and this is why you make that collection look bonkers. And when I say don't grow, he's grown them to 60-ish, around that. It's just the body line is not to everybody's style. It's traditionally quite Showa-like, a bit deep and a bit heavy. But you take one of those fish and nurture it through slowly and focus on that quality that's there and just extract the best out of it. At 45 cm, it's going to be an absolute world beater, and there's a chance you can pick some up there for not a lot of money because of the type of farm that he is. You're going to get the pattern side and the quality. It's just this, you will get body, just you won't get the big kind of growth body that you might want from the bigger players, so to speak. That to me just makes sense. Unheated pond, you're never going to be able to really max out, so go with that. Play to its strengths. Buy these breeders. Is it pointless if you've got £200-300 to spend, or even £100? There's no point trying to buy a Danichi fish that can grow to 90 cm, or the hope that it will. Yeah, you might enjoy it, and I say that because, again, you can enjoy the qualities of a Danichi fish still without it getting massive.
Enjoy the journey.
But just the point being, at that price level at Danichi, you'll sacrifice on pattern big time. You'll get body and skin, you'll sacrifice on pattern. You go to a Kaze show, or all of a sudden you're like, wow. And that's what collection you can potentially build doing it this way.
Before I offended your ears with that question, what I was trying to get on to the sort of mindset of is for hobbyists trying to attain a fish that perhaps they buy as tosai, and then they want it to go through the size classes to nissai. I get that quite a lot. I want to spend good money on a small fish, and then I want to raise it all the way through so it's got a chance, and trying to get that narrative across that the fish on the high end, certainly in Japan, that they peak at different times. Very rarely does the GC win small size.
Those things are rarer than rocking or shit. They really are.
Yeah.
Really are. I can think of a few, and they've mainly been Sakai fish that I can think of that have gone from nissai and then actually worked through the ranks. But yeah, wow, that's a big ask. Big ask of any fish, that is.
I think it can be possibly achieved in the UK, but that's more because of what it's up against.
Yep.
Time and time again, there's the odd fish that just turns up, and it may as well be given the prize before it's even
bagged. It's probably in the smaller sizes there. It's tosai that probably wouldn't compete on the Japanese scene because they're not as polished as some of the small nissai that will get entered, and then that tosai goes on and then actually looks better and does better in the bigger sizes. That's probably where that scales kind of tip with that one, to be honest. But yeah, you're right. I'm glad we're speaking about it, to be honest. I think for most ponds out there, what a way. And this is really, if you take the Bonsai Koi, this is just raising fish to the strengths of what you've got and changing what you're focusing on in order to build the best collection possible. That's right, I've got no heat. I'm relying on summer temperatures for a start. This is without the true art of bonsai raising. You're taking over control like you are for jumbo raising. You've got to control temperature in a different way, i.e. keeping it down. You've got to control light. You've got to control feeding, stocking, just all in the opposite ways to what you're doing for jumbo raising, really. So, yeah, separate that and just look at it as this element of building a wow collection in an unheated pond, playing it to its strengths. Because really, if you're heating a pond and you've got one pond and you're heating it for raising, then doing this is screwed anyway. You're going to need a separate pond to raise fish in that way. They still need the same light exposure. That's massively important actually for raising these, because you've got to get that pigment forced out while you're still keeping the size back. But yeah, I just think what a way. Unheated pond, focus on quality, and then you're going to build a much better collection for your money at all levels, because you're focusing more, you're taking that size element out, which opens up this whole portfolio of breeders. Because if you want to raise a nice big shower, you ain't going to go to Kaze, who's got these super nice patterned fish for reasonable money. You've got to go to a Danichi or someone like that. Then you're just playing a completely different game.
But again, like if you stick that Kaze style pattern on a Danichi fish, we're talking. I mean, his pattern quality is so consistent; it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's actually outrageous.
Beauty is the big. You say Kasuji Showa, that's what I think instantly. Just like Aoki, you don't think Aoki, you just think, oh, wow. Generally, you don't think about size, not at all. It's like Kikakuru. He just produced the best Kikakuru, but you've got to be careful with him. Don't push them too hard. They can grow, but they don't grow like a Marasaka Kikakuru. That lineage is built to grow 80 plus cm units, but they don't look like an Aoki one, do they?
No.
Not even close.
That wow, yeah. That intensity.
What would you rather have? Koi keeping is a very visual hobby. Go for the wow. I mean, seriously, go for the wow. A load of Japanese hobbyists do this way because space is limited in Japan these days.
Well, this is one of the sort of got a small list of advantages that, perhaps if you're caught in two minds or the concept of it is a bit new to you, for example, we've both got relatively new houses. They're not blessed with like gardens like your old man or, you know what I mean? Yeah. So space is a premium.
It is.
So this is actually quite a smart way of still enjoying the hobby.
Yeah.
And actually you could stock relatively well because you're not pushing the fish.
I'm feeling quite inspired for this now. Actually, I think this is something I'm going to have to prat around with just to show what can be done. Yeah. Because I mean, just prime example, you don't need big ponds to really do this, but now with the new heating system, those outdoor ponds, the 3 smaller ones we generally use for saltfish, might have to be one of them this year. Actually, that perfect. They're about 300-ish gallon.
Yeah,
I think decent bit of surface area, but that's prime. So I've got the temperature control. It's not perfect, so I can't cool it down. That's going to be an important part, but there we go. Let's see what we can do with that. I'm sure it'll hopefully inspire people to sort of show what you can do.
Do you think people are missing a bit of a trick, or just this negative connotation is just, we've spoken about the mindsets of this industry that people don't like really change, do they? Or anything that was true 30 years ago must still be upheld 30 years time, which doesn't really happen in many industries, to be honest with you. It does feel like time stands still a little bit in the koi society. So should it be shunned? Should it be embraced?
No, embraced.
Yeah.
I think it's honestly a great subject because people have been completely fucking brainwashed about everything needing to grow big. I'm probably guilty of it at times because it's something I really enjoy doing, but it's not easy. It's just a crazy. And if you look at that quality of collection that you can build, this is where it's at for the budget most people have. Taking size out the equation, or the idea of size. I think this is the problem. Most people have been led to believe you can grow 90 cm fish. It's just a given. It's so easy to do. Buy a fish from Momotaro, it'll grow to 90 cm. Just no, most of the spines collapse before they even get there. It's true. It's true. So yeah, quality, and it'll train your eye differently as well. Focus on quality, and this is what you bring it to the show side of it. That's what it's there for. No, I don't think anybody's really, certainly outside of Japan, given focus to actually raising fish to dominate in them small sizes.
Well,
because is a first prize not a first prize?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people enjoy the koi show scene. Perhaps won't be by far the most amount of fish are in the lower size classes. Perhaps if you're just showing in size 1 or 2, you might have 20 fish in your bag, you know what I mean?
There you go. Yeah.
You start flipping that on its head. That's the way I was looking at it. I think for hobbyists in general, it's important to get in tune with it and
Yeah.
not be so negative. But I think the area that's being missed the most is probably on the show scene.
Honestly, the skill of trying to finish a fish smaller. I just say what some of the stuff I've seen where it's been done proper bonsai koi is mind blowing, and we're not talking super small. You can be 3-4 years
Yeah.
old, but we're talking maybe 40-50 cm on your top end of it. But absolutely bonkers what you can do with them. It really is. But I'm all about people getting the most of what they've got, and this is a great way, to say again, to really achieve that. And that's with any bloodline. There can be fish from your sakais and momoteros that can be raised this way because it plays to the strength. I see it in every batch of fish that comes in. There's always something there that is going to be more suited to that. A fish of absolute quality. I've got them in my Tucano Sankis again this year. I'm looking at them going, yeah, you're going to struggle to compete. If I take you out of this general pond that you're in, where you're lagging behind, put you somewhere else, I'm start playing you to your strengths, and I'm now going to get the most out of you. And there's some of those fish will become absolute worldies. I've seen them even at like the 12 cm that they are and gone, fucking hell, that's bonkers.
That's something, yeah.
And that at 25 cm, whoa, there's nothing wrong.
But I think when it's in comparison, isn't it? When you go, well, that's from the same mum and dad.
Yeah.
That's at 25. That smaller one might be the better fish long term, but keep them in the same environment.
Yeah.
That competition, that sort of, nature does its thing, doesn't it? The bigger dominate.
Now you say, another Tucano Sankey sprung to mind. I've not shared this fish with anybody yet because I've just been slowly letting it do its thing. And it is becoming an absolute rocket. Just structurally, it's probably a 40, maybe 38, 40 cm nissai. So it's not particularly small, just obviously compared to everything else around it. And it's being objective again around what the things are here, and relative. That 40 cm at most farms, say at your Genji, for example, their nissai are probably 40 to 45 cm, the average size. And they're fish that can go on still to grow to 70, 75, 80 cm, depending on the variety. So that's a big element. But in this case, with this Tucano, it's that side. But I can see the bone structure is not capable of being forced. Typically, Tucano nissai maybe 50, 55 cm. But I can just see in the setup, but its quality is just insane, really. And I'm just nurturing that out. And what I'm actually doing with that fish is it's still in environments where the fish are bigger. But I'm aware that it's not forcing it because it's generally going to probably be losing out to those bigger fish. And that's the way I'm raising that.
Slow burner.
If I was wanting to really push that, I'd need to isolate that fish into ponds with a similar size class or size range. But generally, the fish it's in with are probably 10 to 15 centimetre bigger. So it's not an ideal pond for it. But in this case, that's meaning that, it's just slowing down its development, which is where I want it. Slowly going about its thing. But this thing with another few cm on, trust me, it's going to be a worldie.
Hobbyist perceptions a lot of the time when I speak to them, I don't know, you got any nissai? Yeah, what sort of size? 60, 65? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, holy shit, is that where the benchmark is now?
Yeah.
And I think it is. I think because some of the big wigs are producing fish that sort of size, it becomes the standardized, what was maybe 20 years ago, 40, 45 cm nissai was happy days.
The big thing and this is something we don't talk about enough when we're talking about quality, is pattern in it, which we actually very rarely do speak about it. And I think we should do more because, let's face it, it's a fucking massive part of that purchase, that attraction you have to it. It's everything. And this is where the kind of jumbo thing you say there, nissai 60, 65, the compromise is always on the pattern. Unless you've got those super, super big budgets. Not many people do have. So, this is just a way when you take that out of the equation of flipping it around and being able to put more focus on that. Or getting a 3 out of 3 necessarily on more of a budget because, again, your priorities are different. And when you take it, say you take this size element out and this focus on, nissai needs to be that size. No, you focus on the quality. You're going to build an aesthetically and visually stunning collection of fish, regardless of the technique and trying to keep it in a size or anything like that. Just a mindset really of forgetting size focus on quality, you're going to bring pattern into play so much more.
I used to often say to hobbyists, what would you rather? Pond for the banging sort of 60, 65 cm Sansai, Yonsai, or
Exactly.
a pond full of 75, 80 cm sort of stuff that's blown out, pattern's gone, skin's gone.
Yeah. There are even fish, right? I will know, and this has happened. So I was raising the Dainichi Koi, it was last year, weren't it? So there's one fish at one point where it was in that environment. I was pushing them hard, and its colour it was going. I thought, shit, if I push that any harder right now, it's gone. So is that bad colour? It's not colour with potential to go much further, but it weren't bad colour because it's pop. So what I did, I took that fish out of that environment, just moved it to an outdoor pond that was cooler, wasn't being pushed for growth, just a general holding pond at that point. And 2 months later, the colour quality came back to its absolute pinnacle. Honestly, it looks stunning now. Bright red Dainichi Benny on that snow white Shiroji looked absolutely bonkers. And if kept around that size and not pushed in that environment, that will go on looking like that for probably 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. Looks stunning. The minute you put that back in that intense environment, it probably fall apart in 3 months. There's something for you.
So having that foresight of knowing which fish can be pushed and which fish can't.
Yeah. So as a direct result, the value of that fish changes completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like all of a sudden I know. So obviously there's a bit of morality and consciousness of the person selling it, but for me, I know that couldn't deliver on that, and I never would sell it as being that. But because it's lost that potential size, that growth can't be achieved, because if you push it, the Benny's going to go to shit. You can't command the value for that fish. But it is absolutely stunning. And in most ponds, I'd say just a general outdoor pond, unheated, it will go on like that for years. Promise you. There's where you win.
Fish that come from Japan, this is probably goes on more than perhaps we like or would consider. A lot of people would consider chibi nissai in the UK at dealers around the UK being passed off as tosai because they don't want to use that terminology.
No, you've got me. See, this comes as two-part, because there are breeders, actually, unfortunately, that also play that game and pass them off. So sometimes it actually not the dealer's fault. It does happen, unfortunately, but then sometimes it's also not their fault because they've been sold fish in Japan by a breeder.
Yep.
Sold as tosai. There are tells, right? So 20-ish, 25 cm's the size range here I want to focus on, because it's kind of my impression of a general chibi nissai. Two elements of them, don't you? I've mentioned the body line already, because obviously at nissai there's a chance we start getting the female body line developed.
The productive organ.
Straight away. But two elements of them generally, the eyes don't stop growing and the fins don't stop growing. When you tune your eye into this, very rare would I get hoodwinked, unless they've been raised really, really well. Generally, they have to be a lot smaller. But yeah, I've actually seen it on some of the shit I watch on YouTube, to be fair. One video that come up, and I saw a dealer at a farm that I know often pass this variety off as nissai, as tosai, when in fact I know the nissai, because I know where the tosai are kept. I've done it for years. I don't know why they've done it. The first time they tried it with me, they went, "Oh, the jumbo tosai." I looked at it upon and I went, "Bullshit." They sort of looked at me. There's no chance. I mean, easiest thing was when I actually caught a few, I could sex them by looking at the belly. That was a bit of a give.
Well, they feel like sandpaper, yeah.
Bellies and stuff like that, but it was more the eyes. You can just see it, and the head starts developing in a different way when it's not a fish that's necessarily suited to it. That's why I say you've got to have the right, if you're really looking to do it for a show perspective, you've got to have the right fish to raise in that way as well. But in this case, they've kept me, you just can't slow down some of these things, i.e. the fin development. Sometimes they can have mighty weird shaped fins because they've grown a bit too much, and it just don't look right. Like I say, the eyes don't slow down, so little bits like that. And yeah, again, I don't know if in this instance those fish I'd seen are actually being sold as tosai, but I know they're not. And I know this farm's guilty of it all the time. I don't know why. They do it for that reason, because they know
Yeah.
it changes the perception. It's frustrating. And there's another one who's an absolute complete full-time fucker for it, to be fair. And I don't go near it anymore, because for me, raising them, the issue is these are ones that have been the varieties that can struggle with size anyway. Yes, if you take Go Sankey, it's probably easier to recover growth on a small nissai Go Sankey than it is some non-Go Sankey varieties that don't grow well and have tricky belly lines anyway. So you get them all of a sudden as a small nissai, and you start to try and force the growth out, it ain't going to go well. And this breeder just constantly, he has actually last year started selling more of it as small nissai, which he never used to. You'd order Tosai, and I'd get the boxes, and I'd take one look at them and go, "You bastard!" And again, which for me it ruins it, because then I'm not. I know, future time
for your
purpose.
purpose.
For what I wanted, it's kind of lost. But they look great though.
Yeah.
I mean, the particular variety was I think it was Healed Soaries one year we had, and I knew from the colour was just too good to be Tosai. Impossible.
It's a shame that they just can't be sold for what they are.
Yeah, it is.
I think that's determined by the market that they're going into.
It is. Most people, let's face it, the market that people don't care. They're just visually going, wow, that's nice. They're actually more sellable. But for me, I want to decide how I'm going to raise these. I want all the information, and then knowing
that transparency.
That was that. I'm like, fuck, I can't push these now how I wanted to, because I know exactly what's going to happen. Strangely enough, those Healed Soaries, I mean, straight away that intense colour was soon lost as soon as I did start growing them.
Yeah.
As I said, it's just that pigment cells had really condensed on the small fish. As soon as you get it in the environment, it all fell off and went. But yeah, it is frustrating. I like to have the information, and I just don't generally trust that breeder anymore, that I'm getting what I'm paying for, really, or what I've asked for, which, is what it is.
Yeah,
I'm aware of it.
We're not here to slander or anything, but I want to deal with tricky subjects. We've always said that we want to be candid with these types of conversations. So, I think there's a massive market, not commercially speaking, not talking about financially to gain from it. I'm talking about what hobbyists can gain from dealing with. I think that's the first thing we do. We start calling them Bonsai
Koi. There we go. It does change it completely. And that's the thing. These fish can still grow. It's all managing expectations as well, isn't it? Like I say, they can grow, but don't expect one to be. There is an element of lost growth there, but doesn't mean it cannot grow. And what matters is when that lost growth is recovered. Like in the case of those Akawashiros, I recovered it within the same year. So ultimately, by the season where they're generally going into a new growing season, they were the same size as the ones that had been grown earlier. So then it's irrelevant.
And it's people's objectives as well, I guess.
Exactly.
So, if you're going into the market wanting jumbo koi, then Bonsai Koi are not going to be for you.
No. But actually thinking about it now, in the cases of most hobbyists out there, this is probably where the mindset's at. I get lost in my own shit that I'm doing, but for me, I like to be doing all of it. Like I say, there's fish been there, although I've not massively stuck to it. I did have actually one tank last year. It was wrong, the Dainichi. Remember, I kept that back in one of the 400-gallon tanks, all thing, because I knew from the off they were not going to play into their strengths.
But the quality was
putting them, trying to grow them intensively was not the one. And the care basically was just leave them in that tank, make sure they're happy, healthy, chuck them a little bit of food every day. I weren't trying to size control or do anything that, but I weren't trying to put just what will be with them. Fucking hell, mate, we had some bangers come out of there, didn't we? I don't think there's nothing. It's a fine thing seeing a fish at sort of 20 cm that looks colour popping, skin popping, killer pattern. It has the same impression as one at 90 cm.
One to take note of, I dare say there'll be a lot of people listening to this going, not for me, but equally there'll be a lot of people going, might be an avenue for me to look at.
Yeah, and I think, just to be clear, there are two sides to it. There's the actual art of raising them for a specific purpose, where you are intent on hitting a size class or competing for a show, but then there's really looking at this for what it is, and just not chasing jumbo and focusing on quality. And from that, on a much lower budget, on any budget really, you can build a more phenomenal collection of fish, because it really does just open things up massively.
So
really
we can
does.
expect to see bonsai nissai pond up at the farm then this year.
Yeah, I think, hey, we've got to do it, haven't we? Why not? I know I've got fish already that are suited to it, so I think we're one of them ponds and having the temperature control. Why not?
I've always been an advocate. I mean, it's a hard one to flog sometimes. If someone is just dead against the concept of it, fair enough. I'm not going to bother wasting, my breath. But I think there's a lot of people that could probably gain a lot from the hobby by doing this. Or like you said, even if it's a separate, smaller system, if you can't sort of justify running your main pond, low cost, relatively small footprint.
Yeah, you really don't need a lot of water to do it either.
Yeah.
But generally, most of the time, these fish, some breeders just do it because they have leftover fish category from a final selection they've not sold. But what they'll do is leave them in a fish house, probably just feed quite a lot of colour food over that time. They've got good light exposure because they're not in a mud pond, they're in a fish house. It brings the colour on. And those fish are always more appealing to people. You'll walk in and go, wow, look at that. You can't help but do it. Again, I think this is stuff not spoken about enough.
I think, well, that's why sort of this topic was chosen, really, because I don't really think that people are that open about it, and they want to not hide behind, but it's just that negative connotation again. So hopefully if we can break some barriers down and open some minds, as always.
Yeah, and again, it's just generally easier to look after a pond in that kind of state. You feed in like Saki balance as opposed to growth. You don't need to use growth food for raising Jiminy side. It's just all about conditioning. Colour food, useful tool to have. You don't necessarily need to force them too hard with that either. Just by stop pushing the size, you stop
the pigment stretching,
spreading too thin. So even though you didn't challenge me, challenge accepted.
Right, well, I know you like a challenge, so watch this space, I guess, and I think it'll make a nice little follow-up video as well, to be honest with you.
I do, mate, to be honest with you. So, and then I probably want to try and cover some footage a bit more of these breeders who are into
focusing on
this sort of stuff. Yeah, say like your Iokis. It's actually just reminded me, I come across a Deutsch Shower guy one that I'm not even sure I could get back to it. I can't remember who took me. It was on a windy road on way to Uanuma, and you drive past it because it was that high up on a banking. And I went in, and this guy just bred Deutsch Shower, but he wasn't actually following the guideline in Japan, so he couldn't export. Just domestic hobbyist.
Okay, yeah.
Oh my! I walked in this fish house. I was just like, what the fuck? It was bonkers.
Really?
But not a fish in there over 30 cm. Nothing other than his parent fish. Just solely kept focus on beauty, and that place, wow, undeniable. So
awesome. Well, I look forward to seeing this little project then, mate.
There we go.
All right, well, I think that's enough on this topic for now, so we'll see you all the next one.
Nice one. Cheers, folks.